Welcome back to the Viking channel. Let's continue with the travels, and in this episode we are going east. Leaving the Scandinavian mainland and going to the east means that you are going over the Baltic into the Finnish Bay and up the rivers into Russia in order to raid, to trade and to explore. Not that much to settle, but there was some settling. One reason for the successful travels into the east and into the river system was the shallow keel of the Viking Age ship. These are not the long ships made for warfare, these are smaller ships. The keel is shallow, and that means you can go into the rivers. You can also make surprise attacks because no one will see you are coming, since you can go very close. And if you need to go from one body of water into the next, you could either carry the ship or you can make a little carriage and put the ship on that, and you would have big wheels made of wood on there, and you would drag the ship from one river into the next system. In this river system in Russia, they could, for example, follow the river Volga all the way to the Caspian Sea, or the river Dnieper to the Black Sea. On a side note, traveling along the Volga, there was an encounter by the Arabic historian Ibn Fadlan around 921, and he talks about the Vikings, the Rus he met, and he talks about how tall they are and how strong, and he calls them uncivilized, and he witnesses a burial. Traveling east into this river system and all the way down to the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea and finally into the Mediterranean are probably coming from Roslagen, which is the coastline north of Stockholm, and Birka, and they are called the Rus. Rus might derive from Roslagen. And Roslagen, ro in Swedish means to row. So could it be oarsmen rowing over the Baltic into the system and thus making up the name Rus? This is a theory, but of course we don't know, but it's a good guess when you look at the meaning of these words. From Runic inscriptions in Sweden, we know that they went to Holmgård, Novgorod. Novgorod means new city, so a city in Russia, newly established. And this city has a history of more than 1,000 years. And with Holmgård or Novgorod, we also have a connection with the legend of Rurik. Rurik was the leader, and he talks about the Norsemen coming, so that means we can place the Norsemen in the mid-9th century coming to this place. And Rurik was part of the Varangian tribe, later known as the Varangian Guard. One connection between the Viking Age Scandinavia and this part of the world is now found in Estonia, a place the Vikings themselves would call Kurland. 2 ship burials were found in the island of Saaremaa, and finding these ships there were dead bodies, and so they were used for a burial, but they also found a sword which mold, the original mold is found in Roslagen. So some Vikings, they would go further along Volga all the way down to the Caspian Sea, and they would come to something they called Serkland. Serkland, the land of the Saracens, and that is a place we today call the Middle East. A connection with Serkland we have on the Gripsholm stone, where Tula, a mother, she raises a stone after her dead son Harald, who went all the way down to Serkland with his half-brother Ingvar. Ingvar, known as the Wide Traveler. According to the inscription, they went all the way down to Serkland, and they fought bravely and manly, and Harald was also killed there. He never came back. Other Vikings would go down the Dnieper, and they would come to Miklagård, today's Ukraine. Kiev is the major place in this area, and the Vikings would call it Königård. Königård was a major place for trade and for culture. And the Vikings would make allies with merchants, and they would also mix and blend in different ways. Some of them stayed, and some of them were on their way down to the next big place for trade, Miklagård. today's Istanbul. Many of the Vikings who then stayed on and settled in Miklagård, for example, they joined the Varangian Guard. Varangian Guard, mercenary soldiers. Originally a tribe, but then we had the Norsemen joining, and then it became a job. The Norsemen who joined had to watch the life of the emperor, for example. You could say they were on duty, they had to work, and I guess they had time off too. And if they did their job well, they could be wealthy and actually go back home and bring the wealth with them. While on duty in Miklagård, Istanbul, we know that one of the Varangian Guard, a Norseman, was standing there. Maybe he was just having time off while he was working, but he carved runes on a handrail in Hagia Sophia. He carved the runes just saying Halfdan was here. Speaking of runic inscriptions that survived from this time period and shows the Norse presence in this part of the world is from Athens. We had a marble lion standing in the harbor of Piraeus watching over what was going on. On this lion are two inscriptions, two runic inscriptions. But it means that the Norsemen, the Varangian Guards who have been on job duty, has had the time to be in the harbor, to carve the runes on the lion, and no one objecting this while it was done in public on a large monument. Why was that? I assume that the Varangian Guards, they were tall, they were blonde, they were fearless, they were ruthless, and I don't think the population at this place would even have the courage to object to them, so they would let them carve in peace. But one word, it's trikir, and trikir means a young man, someone who is bold, and that word is also found on the Gripson stone where Tula, the mother, Harald's mother, talks about her son and his half-brother Ingvar, the white-traveled, because they went all the way to Serkland and they fought bravely and manly. So it's the same word coming away. Even if we know more about the travels to the east than to the west, there are still many pieces of evidence or information missing. But after the Soviet Union fell, the area became open to more research and to excavations, and hopefully there will be more answers to the mysteries we have. In this episode and in the prior episode, we've been talking about the travels to the east and to the west, and in the next episode we will talk about the means of transportation, the Viking Age ship.